Save it for the end. No, 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 no. No, no. Save it for the end. What a beautiful place. Gee whiz. Hope they don't do anything to change it.
Never. Never going to happen. Senator Franken, you have done something rare. You have written an actually funny political memoir.
The political memoir is maybe the worst genre in publishing, and I didn't want to write one of those. So, in it I try to be honest, and I try to answer the question that I get asked the most, probably, which is being a United States Senator as much fun as working on Saturday Night Live? And the answer, of course, is no. Why would it be? And I also get asked a lot, how did you make the transition? So I explain that. And I also get asked a lot, what's the Senate like? What's it like, especially for someone who didn't come from politics? And then, of course, right now I'm being asked all the questions that I'm sure people are interested in terms of what's happening in Washington right now, and so.
Well, that's a good list. I was gonna start with the transition. The arc of the story of your book traces your journey from Saturday Night Live to a lot of other things dealing with comedy and political comedy, and then your transition into politics. But the question that you threw out here is a question I think a lot of people have. I had starting the book. Why would you do that? Why would you become a politician?
Well, I always had been political, and the sort of the initial animating issue was civil rights, and my parents and my brother and I would watch the news while we ate dinner on tray. We had dinner on tray tables, and it was good. It wasn't TV dinners, and my mom made a good dinner, and but my dad was a Republican. He was a Jacob Javits Republican. There used to be these things called liberal Republicans, and my dad was one of them. And during the civil rights movement, when demonstrators would have dogs sicked on them, or billy clubs or fire hoses put on them, and we'd see that on Cronkite or Huntley Brinkley, which we kind of trade back and forth. My dad would point to the TV and go, "No Jew can be for that." To me and my brother, "No Jew can be for that." And in '64, when Barry Goldwater was the nominee for the Republican Party, my dad switched because Goldwater had voted against the Civil Rights Bill. So this was like the basic lesson that my brother and I learned, which is justice. It was about justice. And when LBJ signed the Civil Rights Bill, he turned to a staffer, I think it was Bill Moyers, and said, Democrats have lost the South for a generation, and he was wrong. It's like forever, and we've lost. And so we've lost the South forever, but we gained my dad, and me, and because I love my dad, and so that was, and I love my mom too, but she was a Democrat already, and I had really was kind of identified with him, and so that was the big deal. So I was always very politically minded and public policy minded and issue minded, and doing comedy, when I started doing comedy in high school, I mean, I actually started doing it earlier, but when I was doing it with my partner Tom Davis in high school, we were doing political satire, and that's what that was the focus of what we did. And when I got to SNL, and I write about this, we wrote a lot of the satire on the show, or the political sketches, and a lot of them I wrote with Jim Downey, who is a great, hilarious writer, and he is a thoughtful conservative. And we never felt it was a job of the show to have a political point of view, to have a bias. And we wanted to do well-observed satire that didn't punish you for not knowing stuff, but rewarded you for knowing it. So I was very proud of the stuff I did over the years. So I was always interested in that. And when I finally left Saturday Night Live, I wrote a book called Rush Limbaugh's a Big Fat Idiot and Other Observations. And boom, people were coming up to me and saying, thank you for doing this. And I kept doing that. And I did my radio show. And what really motivated me to run for the Senate, and I write about this in the book, is Paul Wellstone. And Paul was Minnesota senator, amazingly passionate guy who really believed strongly in justice and in, mental health was a huge issue of his that is part of his legacy that I fight for. But he fought for veterans, homeless veterans. He fought for poor people. He did this while he was a professor at Carleton College. He won in 1990 in a campaign that was an amazing campaign. He was an organizer, and he was the guy I did the most fundraising for and the most stuff as a senator for. He died 11 days before the election in 2002. About a week or two before that, I guess about 3 weeks before that, he had voted against going to war in Iraq. And he was one of the very few incumbents who did that. And so it was just tragic when he died. I'd been campaigning for him. And then Norm Coleman won that race. And a couple months after he was in office, Roll Call did an interview with him, a profile of him. And it had him in his office chewing on and gesticulating with an unlit cigar, which I don't know why people would do that, but he just was full of himself. And at one point he said, to be blunt, I'm a 99% improvement over Paul Wellstone. And I read that, and I just went, who's going to beat this guy? And I didn't quite say that. But, and that was the first moment ever I had ever considered running for office. And frankly, I didn't right away think that I was that guy. But the more and more, as time, that was, like, again, early 2003, and Franny and I moved back to Minnesota, and just to explore it. And the more I explored it, the more I felt like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed going around to bean feeds and all the DFL stuff, and I took it on.
You write about how the closer you got to declaring your candidacy, and when you finally did declare your candidacy, the more you got the advice, stop being funny. And you had a hard time with this.
Right.
What
I,
what made you stop? Because you did eventually rein it in.
Well, the
For
first,
a while.
Well, yeah, until now, basically. Basically, I remember I moved back to Minnesota, but even before I moved back, I started talking to Jeff Blodgett, who had been Paul's campaign manager in all three of his Senate campaigns. And I remember sitting down with him, having coffee with him. And politics in Minnesota especially is a lot about coffee. I imagine it is here too. And thanks to you guys, the coffee got better. It used to be weak Lutheran church coffee is the worst coffee in the world. So I remember having coffee with Jeff, and he said, just as an exercise, why don't you write a 5-minute speech without a joke? And I thought to myself, why would anyone do that? I go, why would you want to do that? And everything I'd ever communicated politically had been through humor. And so or kind of through humor and through other stuff, but mainly humor. And so, and then when I finally did announce, right away, everything, they put the Coleman campaign, the Republicans started putting everything I'd ever written or said in comedy through this $15 million machine called the dehumorizer. And it was built with this very, very sophisticated Israeli technology that could just take the humor out of anything and rob it of its context. If you write satire, you're using things like irony and hyperbole and ambiguity even. And man, oh man, robbed of those things can look pretty ugly. And so it was just a nightmare. And I kind of I had thought that being funny would be an advantage, or it'd be good, and I just had to, like, at a certain point, give up on it. I'll give you an example of a dehumorizer and how extreme it could be. I had written an article once about, it doesn't matter what it was about, except it was sort of about technology and improvements. Anyway, so I just said, I said the internet is just a great learning tool for kids. I said, for example, my son last year did a great 6th grade report on bestiality for his class. And he downloaded a lot of great visual aids. And the kids in the class just loved them because, at that age, they're just sponges. So the point of that joke is, hey, maybe you should look at what your kids are looking at. It was kind of a conservative joke. It was like monitor your kids' downloads. And so anyway, so they turned that into an ad which was like, hello, Franken. Jokes about bestiality. And it came from infinity, through your eyeballs, out the back of your brain. And my mother-in-law cried. And she didn't cry because I joked about bestiality. She cried at, what are they doing to my son-in-law? And so it just became, I had to really, and then we also did, we did focus groups early on, and we learned that, man, people in Minnesota, at least then, just didn't think being a comedian and having award-winning 5 Emmys and all this shit, that didn't mean you were smart. And but they were impressed that I had written books. We found this out in the focus group, and we found that what really, and this was so counterintuitive to me. I went to Harvard. I went to Harvard, and so, and I had always thought, just don't mention that, don't mention you went to Harvard. But in the focus groups, they went, oh, he's smart, he must be really smart. So it was play down the comedy. Books are okay, and Harvard's just great. And
Does it? I wondered, in the context of this, does it piss you off that there's this other guy out there that really didn't run from his TV persona, and all he had to do is say, I'm like a smart guy.
Or I am a smart guy.
Or
I'm
I am
really
a smart guy.
smart.
And he just played his TV persona straight into the presidency, where you had to spend 6 years.
Well, I write about this. I write about sort of the irony of my race in 2008. And because I had written about bestiality, I was guilty of moral turpitude. But I didn't say I engaged in it. I didn't say that I grabbed animals by the crotch, I didn't brag about that. And so the irony I talk a lot about the irony of my 2008 and his 2016 runs in those respects. But I also talk about Trump in regard to where we are now as compared to where we were in 2005. And 2005, after this very close election, Bush said he had capital, and Rove talked about a permanent majority for Republicans. And we were organizing, and because of Air America and Media Matters, which was pushing back on the right-wing media, and the Center for American Progress and other, we stopped them on Social Security privatization, and there was other. And now we have to mobilize against this healthcare. The bill passed in the House, according to somebody who's very, very insightful about health care, is mean. This is the only guy in the country who had figured out that health care policy was complicated.
No one would have thought.
No one thought that. Man, oh man, it is.
Let's go back to a simpler time for a moment.
Yeah.
So you're getting, everything you've said in the past is getting put through the dehumorizer.
Yep.
You're on the campaign trail. You're trying to spin yourself away from your comedic persona, but it's not easy. You've got a lifetime of instinct, plus you think comedy is a good tool for speaking truth to power, for connecting with people.
Right.
And you go out, just in one of many great examples of this you bring up in the book, you go to a town or city to make a speech, and there's a giant German statue.
Oh, Herman the German. New Ulm, Minnesota is this beautiful town in south central Minnesota, and it's New Ulm. It was founded by Germans, and they have a statue to Arminius, who was a Hun who butchered a lot of Romans in 9 AD. in a battle, and it was when Christ was just a tot. You know, it was just a little guy. And so in New Ulm, they have this statue to Arminius, and it's a tall statue, 20 feet tall or 25, and it's on a 75-foot pedestal. And it's in this park. It's quite impressive, and it's called Herman the German. I call him Herman the German. So I'm in New Ulm, and I'm in the park doing a bean feed, actually. And we have a group of Democrats, and there's a tracker there. Now, I grew up in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. St. Louis Park is a suburb of Minneapolis. It's the Jewish suburb of Minneapolis. By that, I mean it's about 25, when I grew up, about 25% Jews, and that's a lot of Jews in Minnesota. That's a shtetl. That's a lot of Jews. So, and Tom Friedman is from there, and the Coen brothers are from there, and Norm Ornstein's from there, and I'm from there. So anyway, but it's called St. Jewish Park in Minnesota. And so I'm a self-respecting comedian, and I'm in the shadow of Herman the German. And of course, I immediately think to myself, you know, I grew up in St. Louis Park, and we had a statue too called Stu the Jew. And but I didn't say it. I didn't say it because I know they would have turned that into, you know, oh, Franken blames the people of New Ulm for the Holocaust. So I had exercised a little discipline and didn't do it. And then, like about a month later, New York Magazine comes to do like a profile of me. And at one point we sit down for an interview, and they go like, so has there ever been a joke that you thought of that you didn't tell? And I go, oh yeah, Stu the Jew. And my staff goes like, why did you do that? And that's when I learned something, which is to pivot. I learned to pivot. Sometimes because I had always been taught as a kid from my parents and teachers, you know, if someone asks you a question, answer it, and give them a nice, complete answer. And with the press, that's the dumbest thing to do. With the press, you're supposed to pivot to what you want to, you know, the message you want to send that day. So, you know, a pivot is like, Norm Coleman's ahead of you by 15 points in the polls. How are you going to convince DFLers, Democratic Farmer Labor Party, DFLers in Minnesota that you're the guy to take them on? And, you know, I would, at first, would answer that question, but then the pivot is, you know, as I travel around Minnesota, Minnesotans don't care about polls. What they care about is their kids' education. What they care about is making sure that they get a world-class health care and that everyone is covered, even if they have pre-existing conditions. And then that's a pivot. That's what you're supposed to do if you're a competent politician. And it took me it took me a long time to learn that. And right after the Stu the Jew thing that was it. I went like, why did I do that? That was stupid. And then so I got another training in pivoting. And then I did my next interview with like a guy who'd interviewed me before for one of the Star Tribune, I think. And so I'm gonna go, okay, I'm gonna pivot. So he asked me a question and I pivoted. And then, he didn't seem to blink at all. And then he asked me another one and I pivot, even like a more egregious pivot. And then, and nothing, you know, he's fine with that. And then now I'm going like, this is fun. And he's like, so I'm like wildly pivoting, like just for the sake of seeing how much I can pivot. And at the end of the interview, like a 20-minute interview, he turns to my press secretary and goes, he's getting good. I think he's I think he's got a shot.
So you pivot
Yeah.
all the way to the Democratic nomination
Yeah.
when you're in your Senate run. But there is a point where Republicans, in digging up your old jokes and trying to make use of them, find one that you end up having to apologize for
Yeah.
against your own instincts.
Well, yeah.
At first.
No, it was against. Here's, I'll tell what this is. At SNL, we would do rewrites late on Thursday night. And it would go to 3 in the morning or something. And it would get pretty dark and raunchy, right? And so, in fact, Christine Zander, I write this in the book, a writer who wrote on the show for 7 years, great, hilarious writer. She had a thing when someone would say something raunchy or something, she'd just go, "Dear Lawsuit Diary." and it just got, and a lot of what you write at that time, you're getting punchy and you're just right. But you're right, you're working. This is work. This is the work that comedy writers do. And there is such a thing, there is an actual phenomenon about late night rewrites. So anyway, Norm Macdonald had this take on Andy Rooney. And it was a similar take that most comedians had on Andy Rooney, which was, and he was amazingly popular and 60 Minutes humorist, but that the take that most younger comedians had was that his stuff was just banal and irritatingly so. So, and Norm did Andy Rooney, and we were rewriting Andy Rooney's sketch that he had done, and he had a great first part of it, and it was just, I cleaned out my desk this week, and there are a whole bunch of old letters. Here's one from California. This one's from Illinois. Here's another one from California. This one's from Michigan. Here's another one from California. This one's from California, too. I guess a lot of people live in California. And so we kind of had that germ of it, which is nailing Andy Rooney so I go like, why don't we just turn him into a monster? And so I was like, here's a vial, here's an empty pill vial of Quaaludes. I slipped some of these into Leslie Stahl's coffee and raped her. Okay, not a joke for the air, it was for the table. There was a New York Magazine writer who was there that week, and he captures this, and it says, now, this is like, I didn't intend that to be on the air. Michael Gerson, who I think is a great conservative columnist, writes a collection of stuff and he said, I wanted to base a sketch on raping Leslie Stahl, So this really caused a crisis, as you can imagine. And I remember talking to Conan O'Brien during this period, and he said, if I was on trial and a prosecutor came up to me and said, Mr. O'Brien, have you ever, during a 3 a.m. rewrite session, made a joke about defiling Lincoln's body immediately after he had been assassinated? I would have to throw myself on the mercy of the court. So I'm trying to, we get in this thing where I'm bleeding delegates because of this, and there's a convention. We really normally bestow there is a primary, but before that there's a convention where you get the DFL endorsement. And I've been way ahead, and now we're bleeding these delegates, and so this was a real crisis. And I write about sort of I didn't have the way things were going, things happened so fast, I didn't really have time for a dark night of the soul, but I had like a dark hour of the soul. And I was thinking, like, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe, I can, and everyone's saying you should apologize for it, and I'm going like, I don't want to, I was doing my job. And what happened was we changed it to, he put it in Mike Wallace's coffee and took photographs of him nude or something. That was how it ended up. But I'm trying to, and we get to the convention and making this speech to a big crowd of delegates, and this is it. This is sort of it. Everything hung in the balance here. And I had wanted to apologize, but in a way that wasn't selling out, that wasn't dishonest, So I basically, I got it. I finally found it, and I just said, this is why I'm running, to get health care to every Minnesotan, get our kids a good education, make sure that we have good jobs. But that's not what this week has been about. And I'm sorry for that. And I really was sincerely sorry for that. When I said, I'm sorry for that, the whole place just went, oh, thank God. They wanted me to apologize, and I wanted to apologize, but I wanted to do it because my campaign manager, Stephanie Shriak, who had just come in, just stepped into the campaign, said, how do you feel about this? And I said, I'm sorry. And so it was, and after that, she said, I never had a base problem after that. I never had a problem. We had all the volunteers we wanted. And that when I said, they all, and then I got a standing ovation. And it was basically, they knew I wanted to do it. They knew I wanted this. And they got the guy they wanted. So that was a moment. And I'm trying to explain sort of, the most important cubic foot of a campaign is inside the candidate's skull. And I kind of try to explain what I was going through in this really weird, unique situation from having been a comedy writer. And I actually started that whole thing out by the guy who's probably my biggest challenger, Mike Cerisi, who was this wildly successful trial lawyer. He dropped out one day, and right before he dropped out, I saw that Elliot Spitzer had been nailed for, going to a prostitute. And I remember just thinking, like, why the hell would he do that? Doesn't he realize all the people that are working for him, that have worked to get him where he is? And that's how I felt. And then this cheer goes up in our office, and Cerisi had dropped out. And everyone's just going nuts, and I'm going like, yeah, it's great. Why did Elliot Spitzer do that? And so the reason I start with that is that I had that moment of like, have I, and you don't know how much Paul Wellstone's memory hung over this race. And so I felt like I was letting Paul down. I felt like maybe I shouldn't have done this, but I sucked it up because I asked Al Gore. I emailed Al Gore. I said, I don't know if you know this, but I think sometimes you're unfairly criticized in a campaign. And what advice do you have for me? And he just wrote back, suck it up.
So we're turning past many pages in the book here, but you ultimately win this race.
Yes.
It's a big fight, a recount, the closest race in Senate history, is that
By
right?
percentage basis, yeah. 312 votes out of 2.9 million. I know. You know, I write in the book, Maria Cantwell, I came out here and did a fundraiser for her. I can't remember this, couple years ago, 4 years, whatever it was. And we're just sitting at some rich person's house. And afterwards, it's in the San Juan Islands. It's a beautiful, gorgeous thing. And we're just kind of relaxing afterwards. And she started talking about her recount. And she went, oh, God, it was awful. Oh, it was 2 weeks. She goes, how long was yours again? I went, 8 months. And she goes, oh my God. I went, it wasn't the Bataan Death March. I mean, at a certain point into that 8 months, it was kind of my new normal. And I won the recount like after 2 months, and the rest of the 6 months was just litigation. And Coleman was ahead the morning after, and he said if he were me, he would take a step back and let the healing begin. And then I won the recount, and he just adopted the anti-healing position, and stuck with it for as long as possible.
So you land in the Senate, and you still feel that you need to hold your comedian persona close. You need to prove to Minnesotans that you're there.
Yeah, especially now. I won with such a close margin, and I just wanted to prove to the people of Minnesota that I was there for a serious reason. So I'm not going to be funny. I'm just not funny.
Did you find anyone in the U.S. Senate, any senators who you could actually share a joke with? Is anyone
God, yeah.
funny
No. I mean, no, I meant publicly funny.
Right.
Actually, sense of humor in the Senate is a good thing. And collegiality is a good thing. You can't, it's impossible to get anything done unless your word is good, first of all. But then you just develop friendships, and, the Republicans were a little wary of me because I had used so much of my comedy to heap scorn and ridicule on Republicans. But right away they figured it out. Like the first day I got sworn in, and Jim DeMint, then South Carolina senator, incredibly conservative, comes up to me and says, how are things on the far left? And I said, they're great. How are things on the nutcase right? And he thought that was hilarious. And and then, a lot of my colleagues have great senses of humor.
You have a story like this about Jeff Sessions.
No,
Before the
Jeff,
recent.
that's a long story, but Jeff's wife, Mary, knit a baby blanket for my first grandchild. So it's hard to hate a guy whose wife did that, and you don't want to unfairly demonize a guy whose wife knit the blankie for your grandson. So it was good that I've been able to fairly demonize him. But anyway, so... But, they're funny. I mean, Lindsey Graham is hilarious. When he was like 16th out of 17 in the last presidential race, I went up to him and I said, Lindsay, if I were voting in the Republican primaries, I'd vote for you. And he said, that's my problem. And so most of my colleagues have a sense of humor, and some even have a good sense of humor. But there was one, Tom Coburn, who, most people who can't sing, they can't sing on key, will say, I have a bad ear, I can't sing. No one will admit not having a sense of humor, except Tom Coburn. Tom will admit it. And he would say, like I'd make a joke in like a markup or something, or a business meeting, and everyone would laugh, and he'd go, I don't get Al's jokes. And he was, so anyway, after enough of this, I went to him and I said to him, Tom, can I take you to breakfast? Because we hadn't been connecting at all. Everything was a misfire. So he said, or can I take you to lunch? I said, and he said, take me to breakfast. I said, okay. So we go to breakfast in the Senate dining room, and it's 8 in the morning, and we're sitting down, and I said, look, for the next 40, 45 minutes, however long this is, let's just have fun, okay? He goes, sure, okay, fun. And and I said, let's talk, we can talk about politics, we can talk about, our families, our careers, whatever. And he goes, but let's have fun. He goes, okay, fun. And I said, okay, now he was known as Dr. No in the Senate because he would put holds on a lot of stuff. He was a big federalist. He didn't believe the role of the federal government was to do pretty much anything. And he was called Dr. No because he had been an obstetrician gynecologist during his career. So, okay, so we said fun. So I said, okay, let's talk a career. Let's talk about our previous careers. Let me ask you something. To be a doctor in Oklahoma, do you have to have any formal education? And he says, yes, you've got to go to medical school. And and I said, okay, Tom, that was a joke. And that's what I used to do. For my career, I used to do jokes. So he calmed down, and then for the next 40 minutes or so, I taught him what a joke was, what the proper reaction to a joke was. And at the end, later that day, we got a note from him, which was, I really had fun. And so that was that. So then, I observed the protocols of the Senate, and when I had any story that involved a private conversation, I have an exception on this, which is Ted Cruz, but I contacted my colleagues, and I just got permission to tell the story. So I call Tom, he's retired in Oklahoma, and I call him up. I go, well, Tom, you remember that breakfast we had? Remember, the joke? I go, like, is it okay if I tell that in my book? And he goes, like, we have a First Amendment. You can say whatever you want. So I said, well, I'm just trying to be collegial. And he, well, you're a gentleman, but you say whatever you want. And so I did. And
all right, people are going to want to ask you questions.
Yeah.
If you've got questions for Senator Franken, start thinking about them, start condensing them also, please. But I do want to talk about Ted Cruz since you
Sure.
brought him up. You have come to have a certain feeling for him.
well, as I say in the book, I say that what you should know about Ted Cruz is that I probably like Ted Cruz more than most of my colleagues like Ted Cruz. and I hate Ted Cruz. And I like him more than most other colleagues like him because he actually has a sense of humor. Not a good one, but he has one. And he values comedy, or at least he says he does. So, I mean, it's you never know with this guy. But I write a chapter in which I explain why people don't like him in the Senate. And in the Senate, you really have to, one, your word has to be good. And two, you really have to be collegial and not, not be a toxic coworker, which he kind of is. He's a guy in the office who microwaves fish, you know. He just, and he doesn't, and to get anything done in the Senate, you've got to have some decent relationships with somebody, and and he has not really accomplished anything other than really getting the government shut down once.
I brought up Jeff Sessions a moment ago because you do have a light moment with him in the book,
Yes.
But more recently, and thankfully, you got him to perjure himself, some would say. And you've had moments. You've had moments like this with Neil Gorsuch, Betsy DeVos. Your questions.
Well, I didn't get Gorsuch to perjure
No.
himself.
But you have had moments that reached us because your questions somehow penetrated the clutter more than others.
Oh. Now, obviously, when I was writing this book, I didn't anticipate Trump winning, and I didn't anticipate these hearings, but I wrote about hearings because I'm good at hearings. And I was particularly good at, you get the testimony the night before, usually. And I would like to read the testimony because this is important stuff. These hearings are important things, and it's important issues that affect the people of Minnesota and affect the people of Washington State and affect the people of the country. And these, when you're testifying before the United States Senate, I think you should, one, be truthful. And I just had this kind of thing where I would read the Republicans' testimony first. And because of my training from Lies and Lying Liars Who Tell Them a Fair and Balanced Look at the Right, and Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot, and The Truth with Jokes, all these books I had written, I really am good at spotting when they're lying.
Can I translate? Bullshit? Because in the audiobook you say that senators can't say something like that, so I just wanted to...
Yeah, you folderol.
Right.
I have a little thing that says USS after words like folderol. Because just in the United States Senate, you can't say what you said. So, but no, and I'm kind of good at, and also because I'm a comedian and a performer, I was a performer too, I'm good at framing things in a way for a maximum effect, I think. So with Betsy DeVos, it was simply that I had I'd been told, you have a courtesy visit with these nominees in your office. And I'd been told before my visit by colleagues that, on the Help Committee and Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, she doesn't know much about education. So I have her come, and I just want to, just feel out how little she knew. So basically what happened was after 2 or 3 questions, me and my education staff were going like, oh my goodness, Oh, man, she does not know anything about public education. She just doesn't. She's done this voucher stuff, really, and she's said it, and her husband has said it, this to build God's kingdom, to get, public school money to pay for kids to go to parochial school, and and her family, the DeVos family, has given about actually Bernie asked her this in the help committee. He just went, how much money has your family given to the Republican Party? And she she just goes, oh, about 200 million. and you go, well, let me ask you something. Do you believe that you would be here if your family hadn't given $200 million to the Republican Party? She goes, oh, no, yeah, I think I would be. Okay, so then I just asked her, and I thought a lot about this. In education, and No Child Left Behind was all about testing and all about trying to hold schools accountable. And the first No Child Left Behind, the rules were that you had to test only in grade level. So if you were a sixth grade teacher, and there were and the tests in that, or eighth grade, the kids would be tested just at that level, and you and the school would be judged on what percentage of kids exceeded proficiency. And so it created this perverse race to the middle, which is that teachers would focus on just the kids just above and below proficiency. And the kid up here, there's nothing you could do to that kid that they would fall below proficiency. And the kid down here, that year, you probably couldn't get that kid to proficiency. So the focus kept being on these kids right in the middle. Well, in Minnesota, they felt that was silly, and also the No Child Left Behind tests were given in late April, and you didn't get the results until the end of June or in July, when it was too late for the teachers to use the test results to inform their instruction. So in Minnesota, we started, in addition to the No Child Left Behind test, taking these computer adaptive tests. And they were computer tests so that you get the results right away, and they were adaptive, meaning that you could test out of grade level. So if the kids were getting questions, were getting stuff wrong, the questions would get easier, and you could determine what grade level they're at, if they're below proficiency. And if the kids were getting everything right, the question again, you'd see where that kid is. So, and the whole thing about this is that a fifth grade teacher who takes a kid from a second grade level of reading to a fourth grade level of reading is a hero and not a goat. But under growth, and that's why you measure growth instead of proficiency. And this is sort of the key to the debate in how you hold schools accountable. And of course, if you're going to be giving money from the public school system to private schools and Catholic schools and so forth, you really want to make sure that that's actually doing some good, and by the way, it hasn't. And so I basically said 2/3 of what I just said before asking her, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the controversy or the argument of growth versus proficiency. I mean, I'm mixing metaphors. Deer in the headlight, accompanied by tumbleweeds. It was stunning. And it went viral, and every teacher, and not just teachers, but parents and principals and superintendents and anybody involved in education in any way at all, was going, thank you. And
I want to let people know if you have questions and you're wanting to ask one, now's the time to line up at the microphones here. And while you're doing that, we'll be quick with questions, and I want to ask you one last question. Particularly here in Seattle, people spend a lot of time feeling bad about the state of our politics, feeling scared about where the country is going, and worrying about what is going on in Congress. You're there. How bad is it, really?
Well, you're not alone, believe me. This is national, and Trump every day to me is an affront that this guy is president. And I write about sort of I wrote these books about lying. And it seems that you don't pay a price now for lying at all. Just shamelessly lying, repeatedly lying, lying for the sake of lying. And it almost as if you're rewarded for it, as if his his supporters feel like it's just more interesting if you lie. It's like a movie loosely based on a real story. If you enhance it, I'd rather see a movie that takes a lot of liberties. And I don't know where this is all going to lead, but I just put it this way, in terms of the Russian investigation and whether they had any ties to it, to the interference. The Trump people and Trump himself aren't acting like people who have nothing to hide. And so, in the meantime, we have terrible stuff happening, whether it's about dropping out of Paris, and the biggest crisis to me is healthcare. And what's happening right now, in the Senate. And so that's where my focus is. I'm on Judiciary Committee. I have some oversight on this investigation, but I am just scared to death about any version of the House bill passing. So.
All right, let's start over here.
Sorry, excuse me. I have a couple questions. My name's Allison. I'm with Town Hall, House Manager. I have a couple announcements, not questions. First, after the Q&A is finished, there will be a signing line downstairs. If you want to get your book signed, I would exit out that way, back behind you to your left, the south stairs. If you want to just exit, please exit the north stairs. Just so you know, during the signing line, there's no personalization and no posed photos.
It's just because we got to get
through
it. And so I'll just go to the title page. I think you guys will handle that. And then I'll sign it, and I'll try to look at you. At some point.
Yes.
I may say, enjoy. or
And we only have
something like
a
that.
time for just a handful of questions, a couple questions. So if you don't get your question answered, I apologize. But thank you.
Okay.
Let's start here.
So this question is about healthcare. With people moving more and more in a progressive way and people just dying for single payer in our country, when and how are the Democrats going to start sticking their necks out and supporting the single payer bill?
Okay.
And I know it's about money. I know it's about corporate support, but if you have something beyond that to share, I'd love that to hear that.
Well, I certainly would support single payer and support single payer. I write in the book that in 2009, when we passed the Affordable Care Act, we needed 60 votes for anything. And those of us who were for single payer were about 50 votes short. So what we did with the Affordable Care Act, during, God, I don't want to give too long answers to these things. When we were doing the Affordable, in my debates with Norm Coleman, he would say, we have the best healthcare system in the world because of Mayo, because Minnesota, we have Mayo, and that's the best health. And the thing is that Mayo is great. You get great care at Mayo and the Cleveland Clinic and some other places, but that isn't a healthcare system. We didn't have a system. We had a lot of different systems. If you were in Medicare, you were in the Canadian system. You were in single payer. If you're in the VA, if you're in the military, or you're getting it through the British system, socialized medicine. If you were getting it through your employer, you're in the German system. If you didn't have insurance, you were in the Cambodian system. And what we're trying to do, we couldn't get single payer. We couldn't get it done. So what we're trying to do is get people from the Cambodian system into one of the other systems. And that's what we tried to do. And there were a lot of good things that came out of the ACA and a lot of progress. And what we should be doing right now is addressing the weaknesses in it, and part of it are weaknesses that came about because of deliberate sabotage by Republicans. But I got to move on to the next question. I could talk a lot about our health care. Yeah.
Senator Franken, thank you for all you do, and thank you for being here tonight. I'm wondering, as a member of the Judiciary Committee, what you and your colleagues are doing or planning to do in order to maintain the independence of the judiciary now that the filibuster has been effectively removed for most nominees.
Well, of course, we had already removed it for district courts and circuit courts, and that was us in 2013, but that was because we could not get them to do equivalent of the Gang of 14, which happened in 2005. So they did it on the Supreme Court. They are really, I chaired, because Dianne Feinstein had to do something, so I chaired a hearing where we had two unbelievably awful nominees, both of whom had, for some reason, done blogs that, one called Justice Kennedy a prostitute. It's like, how, you want to be a federal judge and you do that on a blog? I can't believe this. So we were, he won the election. Trump won the election. They get to nominate. And they have the majority, and they're going to, and so right now, this is the same as we've had since 2013. It's just a majority. And, we're going to, I don't know if what our plan is on the most awful ones, and it's hopefully everyone's attention will be on some of the other cirrus, but they're going to try to get terrible people in, and they probably will.
Over
So
here.
sorry. This is why. This is why we're all so worried. Yes.
Yes, I have a healthcare question as well. As you know, that the Senate has this committee. They're meeting in secret. Literally, Mitch McConnell.
It's not a committee. It's just
Right. It's a group. It's a
Yeah,
group.
it's
Yes.
a group.
It's a group. Yes.
group of
And
guys.
apparently, Mitch McConnell wants to roll out whatever they decide to do without even a committee process, let alone regular order. I'm reasonably well read. I suspect everyone in this room is as well. Do you know anything about what those guys are doing that we don't know?
Oh, okay. Right now, it's just about they're getting 50 for something. I don't think Mitch McConnell is steeped in healthcare policy, and I don't think he cares. I think he just wants to get 50 votes and get something out so they can fulfill the thing they've been saying for 7 years, which is they're going to repeal and replace it. And so this is the question we're asking. There's not much leaking out. There's some stuff leaking out. But a lot of Republicans thought Hillary was going to win. And for the last, since 2010, they have not really thought about health care other than to use it as an issue. And so I am shocked that and I'm not saying that like Casablanca, I'm literally shocked that I have colleagues who don't know anything about health care. They don't know that if you allow insurance companies not to cover a certain set of essential health benefits, that you're completely getting rid of the protection for people with pre-existing conditions. So I don't know what's going to come out of there, because that's in the House bill. The House bill allows states to have waivers on essential health benefits, and they would be back to they're going all the way back to before the ACA. This is, I'm hoping they can't get the 50 and that we end up having to do it in a bipartisan way.
We're going to take 2 more questions, starting with you.
So thank you again for being here tonight. As I'm sure you know, the verdict for the shooting of Philando Castile was announced today.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know anything you could say. How do you fix a system where if I'm afraid of someone because of the color of their skin, I can kill them and get away with it? And I realize that's a difficult question.
Well, anybody who saw that video and, on top of all we know that police have been, killing black people because they're black people historically, and that we now see it because we have cell phone cameras. We've seen videos of the South Carolina thing where the guy was running and he places a taser near him, and I don't know what happened in this. This was a jury. This was a jury that was mixed racially. What we saw, and I wasn't on the jury and I wasn't there, so I don't know. It's obviously very disturbing, but I want to hear more about the case and what the rationale was. I know that I believe his girlfriend said that he told the officer he had a gun and then was going to reach for his registration. That's when the policeman shot him. And but I would have to know more about the trial. But there's no question that this is incredibly disturbing, and is that there are communities in the country that have every right to be just very angry about the whole history of this. So,
Thank you for not pivoting.
for what?
I didn't hear it.
What did he say? Oh, for not pivoting. I got it. That's funny. Okay. All right.
Last question over here.
Hi, Senator Franken. Thank you so much for coming to Seattle. My name is Rick Hegdahl, and I am the National Field Director for VoteVets.org.
Good
We're
for
the
you.
largest progressive veterans PAC in the United States, representing 500,000 veterans, family members, and other supporters. And you came to Kuwait in the USO tour back in 2005, and I was there, and I had to miss it because I was on watch. So this is my thank you, my personal thank you for coming over there and taking care of the troops and entertaining them so well. A bit of information about Medicaid that you may or may not be familiar with, but nearly 1.7 million veterans in the United States rely on Medicaid in some form or another, either to supplement their VA care or Medicare or what have you, which also includes 17 million veterans. Oh, I'm sorry. I have something I can hand to you later. You know, I want to
Sure.
thank you mainly for all the health care support you've given and all the support you've given for veterans, including the service dogs for veterans. That was an awesome thing for you to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say this.
Should we take?
Let me
So
thank
since
you.
that,
Thank you to Vote Vets, and thank you for the USO shows were the best thing I ever did.
since that wasn't a question, we'll give you the last question here.
All right. Who's your favorite SNL character right now?
What I what?
Who's your favorite SNL character right now?
Oh, I'm not going to do that.
Okay, all right. Then
I
you're
thought
gonna-
they had a great year. I thought they had a great year, and that's beyond the political stuff. I thought they just had a really good season. I think the cast really gelled, and I think I think there was a balance between the right. I thought the writing this year was good. I mean, the show always in the best years we had, the show would be spotty. It was just how spotty was how good the year was. This year, I thought they had a good balance between the writing and the performing, and that's when the show is always at its best. So it was a good.
Senator Franken, I was counting on this question rising up from out of the audience. Since it didn't, I'm going to take a liberty and ask this question to close this out with. A lot of people told me to ask you this question. You can hear the concern in the room about the direction of this country. You obviously have the chops as a communicator, as a television personality.
Don't go there.
And you have the policy chops. Would you consider running for president?
Well, I think I think you want someone as president who just really badly, wants to do that, and just has that fire in the belly. And I've seen the presidency up closer as a senator, and I just think it's not a job that I really, really, really want. And I just don't, I think that you should really want that job. And I think that'd be like a good thing for the president. So, and it's very flattering. Thank you. It was very flattering to hear that little splatter of applause. And, we'll find somebody who's great, who's going to be really, really strong, and that'll come through the process, I hope. And, I just, I'm too tired already. I don't.
Vice president? Could I bargain you down to vice president?
Well, it'd be weird. That's a little easier. I only if the person who asked me is really young and healthy.
Senator Al Franken, thank you so much.
Okay.
For the signing over there.